Welcome to the TOEFL Listening section. In this part, you will hear one or more conversations in an academic or campus context, such as a discussion between a student and a professor, or between two students. You may take notes while listening. Listen to part of a conversation. You will hear it only once, so listen carefully. After the conversation, you will answer questions about what you heard. Some questions will ask you about main ideas and details. Others will ask about implied meaning, speaker attitude, or how ideas relate to one another. Use both what is stated and what is implied to answer.
Good afternoon, Dr. Roberts. Thanks for seeing me during office hours. I am working on a policy brief about housing affordability crisis solutions, and I wanted to get your perspective.
Good afternoon, Maya. That sounds like an important project. Tell me which interventions you are focusing on so I can help refine your argument.
I have a list: inclusionary zoning, rent subsidies and vouchers, upzoning near transit, community land trusts, housing trust funds, and a few tax measures like land value taxation. But I am not sure how to structure the brief to show trade-offs and real-world examples.
That is a solid list. A good approach is to organize sections by policy goal. For example, expand supply, reduce demand pressure from speculation, and support the most vulnerable with direct subsidies and protections.
Can you help me explain how inclusionary zoning fits into expanding supply? I keep seeing mixed evaluations.
Inclusionary zoning requires or incentivizes developers to set aside a portion of new units as affordable. It can produce mixed-income housing and create affordable units without direct public spending. However, it can also reduce developer incentives if not paired with density bonuses or fee waivers.
So you are saying inclusionary zoning needs complementary incentives. Are density bonuses an example of that?
Yes, density bonuses allow developers to build additional units in exchange for providing affordable units. That helps offset the cost of affordability requirements and supports higher overall supply when combined with upzoning.
Upzoning is politically controversial. Some cities like Minneapolis have changed single-family zoning. Does upzoning reliably lower housing costs?
Upzoning increases allowable density, especially near transit nodes. In theory, it raises supply and reduces price pressure over time. But short-term outcomes depend on demand, developer behavior, and whether new units are affordable to low-income households. Without affordability mandates or subsidy, upzoning can lead to market-rate development that does not help the lowest-income renters.
That makes sense. What about vouchers and rent subsidies? They seem direct but expensive.
Voucher programs are direct demand-side tools. They help low-income households afford existing housing by covering a portion of rent. Vouchers are efficient at reducing homelessness and immediate housing insecurity, but they do not increase supply. In tight markets, vouchers can push rents up, unless coupled with supply expansion or landlord incentives to accept them.
I read about community land trusts as a supply solution that keeps housing permanently affordable. Can you describe how they work and give an example?
Community land trusts acquire and hold land in perpetuity and lease it to homeowners or nonprofits. The CLT separates land ownership from building ownership, which lowers purchase prices and prevents speculative resale. A well-known example is the Burlington Community Land Trust in Vermont, which has preserved long-term affordability for homeowners.
How scalable are CLTs and housing trust funds for big cities facing a housing affordability crisis?
CLTs work well for targeted preservation and community control, but scaling requires substantial public or philanthropic capital. That is where housing trust funds come in. A housing trust fund is a pool of dedicated revenue that cities use for subsidies, land acquisition, and development of affordable units.
A housing trust fund sounds practical. Could you explain funding sources and examples?
Trust funds are funded by linkage fees on commercial development, dedicated property tax levies, transfer taxes on real estate transactions, or portions of general revenue. For example, some West Coast cities use developer impact fees to fund affordable housing. The key is predictability of revenue, so planners can commit to long-term projects.
You mentioned tax measures earlier. How would a land value tax help?
A land value tax taxes the unimproved value of land, rather than buildings. It discourages speculation and holding vacant lots, and encourages efficient use of land, including redevelopment at higher densities. Revenue from a land value tax can be earmarked for affordable housing programs.
What about rent control and tenant protections? Activists advocate for them, but I hear economists warn about supply effects.
Rent control protects existing tenants and reduces displacement. Strong tenant protections like eviction limits and rent stabilization can preserve affordability for vulnerable households. However, strict long-term price controls can discourage maintenance and reduce incentives for new construction. Combining tenant protections with proactive supply policies and incentives for landlords to maintain units reduces negative side effects.
Are there international models that show success?
Yes, Vienna's social housing system has long-term public investment in high-quality affordable housing accessible to many income levels. Singapore's Housing Development Board provides subsidized public housing at scale through land assembly and centralized planning. Those models rely on significant public ownership or control to deliver affordability at scale.
How should I present trade-offs in the brief so policymakers see realistic outcomes?
Use case studies to show combined policies. For instance, pairing upzoning with inclusionary zoning and a housing trust fund can increase supply and capture value for subsidies. Pairing vouchers with landlord incentives and eviction protections helps the most vulnerable in the short term. Be explicit about fiscal costs, implementation timelines, and likely distributional impacts.
Do you have any recommendations for empirical indicators to evaluate policies?
Track indicators like net new affordable units created, price-to-income ratios, displacement rates by neighborhood, time to lease for voucher holders, and vacancy rates. Also monitor land banking activity and speculation indicators. These metrics show both supply response and social outcomes.
One last question. Should small steps like allowing accessory dwelling units be part of the solution?
Yes. Allowing ADUs increases gentle density and provides rental options without large redevelopment. ADUs are politically easier and can quickly add modest supply. They are best as part of a broader strategy that includes deeper affordability tools for low-income households.
Thank you. This helps me structure the brief around supply measures, demand-side support, and anti-displacement policies with concrete examples and metrics.
Good. Remember to recommend a balanced package. I can review your draft if you bring a section on financing mechanisms and expected outcomes.
I will. Thanks again, Dr. Roberts. I will include case studies from Vienna, Singapore, Burlington, and a few U.S. cities that use trust funds and upzoning.
That sounds comprehensive. See you next week.
Listen again to part of the conversation, then answer the question.
A housing trust fund is a practical local tool because it pools revenue for subsidies and land acquisition to support affordable units.
This concludes the conversation portion. For more TOEFL practice tests and study materials, visit Spinta.org.